Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1230. And this is a work which is from the year 1975, and the name of the filmmaker is Martha Coolidge. And the name of the work is Not a Pretty Picture. Is the really complex and amazing work, which is described as being from the year 1975. And this is written by Martha Coolidge. It is produced by Martha Coolidge. It is directed by Martha Coolidge. And it also features Martha Coolidge in a very, I think, very direct and personal way. Both behind the camera and also in front of the camera. And indeed, some of the prep behind the camera is captured in front of the camera. And that's one way of trying to introduce, I think, one of the many various, say, levels of operation that are occurring in this work. Also occurring, of course, is the performances. And this is from the really splendid cast, included in which are Michelle Manetti and Jim Carrington and Anne Munstuck and others. It is very multi-leveled in terms of its approach to story or stories, both drama and documentary, and very personal, very intense, very compelling, with a subject matter that is very serious and dealing with very serious issues. And approaching them and exploring them in a very type of direct and almost in a dissecting nature, breaking down some of the psychological complexities and the difficulties and the traumatic points that are associated with, as I say, the many multifaceted approach to how this film is telling its stories. And this is the work, again, from the great filmmaker, artist Martha Coolidge. And the name of the work is Not a Pretty Picture. Not a Pretty Picture. It comes to the Criterion Collection courtesy of this wonderful Blu-ray edition, which is what I have in front of me. It is, so we'll talk about the way it looks and sounds in terms of the, and this film is being made available courtesy of this new release in 2024. It is a mind-blowing achievement from an artist extraordinaire who I think whose film Not a Pretty Picture, I hope, gets a lot of recognition and a lot of discussion, and many people are able to see it as possible. I knew Martha Coolidge growing up, the first film that I was aware of in terms of Martha Coolidge's work was a film that came a little bit later in the early 1990s, which is called Rambling Rose. But I didn't associate Martha Coolidge with the rest of her filmography, and including Not a Pretty Picture. But that recognition and that acknowledgement and that understanding of her body of work came a little bit later in my life. And now, courtesy of Criterion, many years after I first I first heard the name Martha Coolidge in the context of my own cinema journey, here we have an incredibly important work and a profound film from Martha Coolidge that I think it's not just me who thinks this way. It is there are many other people who have voiced this and have claimed this and have been able to thoughtfully thoughtfully established this much better than I could ever hope to achieve in my own limitation in words and expressions. But to be able to proclaim this as being a master work for many reasons, both in terms of content and also in terms of construction. This is a powerful achievement from the 1970s, a kind of rigorous and no holds barred type of expression of independent cinema on the one hand, and a real, a truly intimate and truly independent voice. And the voice is one that has a lot of thought and also a lot of one's own life and livelihood and one's own personal, say, history and also personal trauma and also personal past and details on the line, as it were, because when we understand what the subject matter is, we understand that we see things both unfold before us in front of the camera in terms of kind of drama involving a schoolgirl and what happens on a date that goes very terribly wrong, and then how those circumstances are affecting not just Martha Coolidge but also other members of the cast and crew. And so this is a very forceful and quite a vivid and very impactful film for Martha Coolidge, and that is the film Not a Pretty Picture. So I think if we were to try to focus on the plot or story structure of this, and I think I've already alluded to this, we have a story about a young girl or a young woman, a young teenager, who is Martha, and this is portrayed by Michelle Manetti. And we also acknowledge that, I think from the outset, we understand that Martha that's being depicted here is Martha Coolidge, and so Martha Coolidge is using this opportunity of the creation of this film to, a sense, tell us or convey to us a very traumatic episode that occurred early in her life when she was young. And then the retelling of this becomes the focal point of this drama, again, with Martha at 16 years of age. And we see her in school and in the school setting. We also see her on a date and with her a boyfriend or a young boy, a young man that they're out on a date, and also they are accompanied by a number of friends as well. And over the course of the evening and night, we come to realize that there are many things that are going on here, and very serious things and very traumatic things that happen. And we are introduced to this point, I think, quite immediately when we enter into the film, in the opening, say, moments of the film upon the opening credits. And we realize that this is a film that is depicting a sexual assault, a rape that occurs, and Martha at 16, and her being with this young man, and she gets raped. She is sexually assaulted, and not only do we see the night that unfolds that leads up to this very terrible situation. Very terrible situation. We also see the what happens after this night, and also what happens to Martha, the young 16-year-old girl. We see her in school afterwards, and we see how the schoolmates are treating her. We assume that the word has spread about what has happened from maybe other people that are involved in this night out, so to speak, and her reputation has been affected in a very seriously disadvantageous way. So people believe or think or perhaps have a notion or idea of Martha in terms of her approach to sex and sexuality. And also there are concerns about the aftermath of the sexual assault and what occurs with respect to her own body and her own worries and her own concerns about her future. And so this is a very intense story, but one with Martha, 16-year-old Martha, front and center, where she is not just grappling with the consequences of what has been happening to her, or what has happened to her, and what is happening to her, but also how this affects her perception of what the other people in her life are treating her as, and also how that seems to be altering or changing her own perspective about maybe the environment around her. And so it becomes I think, intense and very internally focused psychological drama with the young Martha front and center. And also we see how maybe people might be drifting away from her in a really cruel fashion. In almost an absurd fashion, but also we see the potential of other people emerging and not just coming to her defense, but also really creating the potential of bond and a kind of close knit relationship especially in consideration of the circumstances that young Martha finds herself in. So, and with Martha herself, we see her and being very vulnerable, being struggling in a lot of respects, but also taking things, I think, not just at face value, but really confronting things and taking things head on, and really expressing frustration, expressing sadness, but also expressing a type of a need to try to find some route towards a reconciliation, if one can call it that, or perhaps to try to find some means to reach a sense of a type of maybe the phrase closure is not the most appropriate word, but to find some kind of anchor or some kind of a trajectory, or a way in which she can not just fend for herself in this ever-changing set of circumstances, but also not just reclaim her sense of self and her individuality, but really reclaim it, but also proclaim it, and also really establish herself and reestablish herself and who she is, and how she views herself. To herself. And this is, I think, an incredibly charged and incredibly important and a very moving journey, and a moving a portrait of young Martha in this way as the drama unfolds. And so this is one level of Not a Pretty Picture. It is incredibly compelling drama in that way. But this is not all, because we also have an extra level, or another level, which is introduced also early on into the film, when we start the film, which is Martha Coolidge herself, the filmmaker, on location or on set, or in the particular places where she's shooting, and in the primary location that we see Martha Coolidge herself, the filmmaker, is in the sort of vacant apartment loft place where the young people go, and this is where the very horrific event of young Martha at 16 occurs. And so we see the setup and the filmmaking process being had. We see the light setup. We see the crew walking back and forth in the background. We also see Martha Coolidge talking with the actors that are engaged in this film. So that specifically is the actor who plays young Martha. And so there's Michelle Manetti, and also we see the actor who plays Curly, who is Jim Carrington. And we also see Martha engaging and having interviews with other people, such as Anne Munster, who plays herself in the film. uh, who is the roommate, who also has a very key critical role in the proceedings of the drama. But this is very, very important because we see Martha Coolidge herself, the filmmaker, and again, we understand immediately, or we understand from the outset, that this is Martha Coolidge, the artist and the filmmaker, and Martha Coolidge, the individual who is retelling this aspect of her story. So this really happened to her. Martha Coolidge in her life some years back prior to the making of this film. And so we also understand that other people who are involved in this film, in the making of film, some of the actors too, also themselves express how similar horrific events have also occurred to them as well. So this becomes, in that way, a kind of maybe a way in which certain events that are very traumatic, very terrible, that have occurred emerge as being part of the telling not just one's own story, but realizing that this is an experience that that has very terribly been experienced by other people here. But what this then leads to, which is I think one of the things that is highlighted in some of the discussions and supplements, which we'll talk later in the context of this video discussion, but how this then becomes a way for which people who watch this film or people who are participating in this film somehow or other are able to then maybe not just reclaim themselves but also proclaim themselves, and as a means to try to handle or deal with what has happened to them. And again, we see thus Martha Coolidge herself, in a sense, trying to deal with or grapple with or handle this episode of her life as it's being retold by her herself. The way this is being done, as it's shown in the film, is we see Martha Coolidge, the director, maybe looking on as some of the very critical and very intense scenes are occurring and are being shot. And I'm speaking about the very intense moments between Curly and Martha, the characters in the film, Curly and Martha, who are being portrayed by actors in the film that we are watching. Then we see the film, maybe we see off behind the camera or to the side, and we see Martha Coolidge actually conversing with the actors themselves, and we hear what the actors are thinking as they are maybe planning the shot or planning the scene, or maybe thinking about how they felt after they've just completed one take of a particular scene. And it is quite intense indeed. For instance, we hear a lot from Michelle, the young actor who plays young Martha, and we hear about, again, her personal experience also comes through in some of the discussions that she makes, and also how she is trying to approach the scene. And mind you, Martha Coolidge has an approach where she is maybe having different alternate takes of a particular scene, and that's quite intense, quite psychologically and emotionally on the actors. But for instance, Michelle Manetti is seen talking with Martha Coolidge and others, trying to again express how it is she's feeling in a given moment, and as they maybe are building up to shooting a take on the scene, or maybe have just finished shooting a take. And the same is true for Jim Carrington, plays Curly the young man. And this is also another fascinating thing, because we also see his approach as an actor, and he describes himself as being someone who is not necessarily the same. He doesn't have the same approach, or not approach, that's not the right way of wording it perhaps, but the point is that his mindset individually as the actor, Jim Carrington, as himself, is in a very different mindset than the actor or the character that he is playing, let me put it that way. And so he expresses this difficulty in trying to reconcile how he's expected to approach this role as an actor, and how he's very directly admitting how some of the intensity of some of the takes of the scenes are really trying for him and very challenging for him. And so this goes into some very, very, I think, open conversations, again, from their own personal perspectives about relationships their own perspectives on relationships with, say, men and women. And for instance, going for Jim Carrington and how he is seen talking with Martha Coolidge and others, and using this opportunity to talk about how he views relationships with women, or how maybe other people in maybe his clique or other cliques of friends, and maybe not quite his group, or maybe his groups, etc., how they would view women in school who may have had, for one reason or another, a certain quote unquote reputations, and how that sort of reputation, how his retelling of how he understood certain cliques operated in terms of their treatment of, say, other girls in the classes who might have had, again, for one reason or another, reputations of sexual promiscuity, and how those people were viewed by the sort of the school body writ large, or other people in the same grade, or writ large in the same school writ large. And it was incredibly intense and very telling, and very revealing moments. And that's an example of what we see in terms of the incredibly emotionally intense rigor that not just he, but also, of course, the actors and the crew, and among which, of course, is Martha Coolidge, that they go through in order to try to achieve the creation and retelling of this story. And again, I think people come at it from their own personal spaces, and of course, each person has their own intimate and maybe different story that might have some overlap and might have some similarities. But perhaps that type of understanding that this experience is perhaps, unfortunately, more shared than one might realize, or one might like. That maybe realization itself is maybe one way in which, again, that reclamation, that proclamation of oneself and one's individuality and one's own, say, outlook on oneself, that might be in the words of Martha Coolidge, as this is mentioned, as Martha Coolidge mentions it, say, in some of the other supplements, how this might be not just a type of step towards some kind of reconciliation or resolution, in a manner of speaking, but also a type of therapy, but also trying to, as I say, reclaim and proclaim who she is and who other people are, again, through their own individual experiences that become shared in this way. So it is a very deep film. It is a very profound film. It is, I think, very purposefully playing with the structure of cinema. It is very experimental in that regard. It is dealing with a type of documentary process that I think is turned on its head when we realize not just the emotional rigor that's taking place, but also the formal structure that is being employed. I mean, some of the scenes are undergoing multiple takes, and sometimes the takes are very, very different, and sometimes the perspective on the subtle change of the take will have ramifications that lead to some very profound discussions between and among cast and crew, off camera, or, as you know, in between takes. And it goes into some very complex details about assault, and about maybe the perspectives of the parties concerned, or the possible perspectives of the parties concerned, and the notion too of aggression and sexual aggression, and also the notion too of a type of emotional manipulation, and also too a sense of guilt that arises for maybe all people concerned. But I think Martha, both the character Martha, and also the real artist Martha, and also the actors in the setting themselves, in the film themselves, they also express where this feeling of guilt comes from, and why this feeling of guilt emerges the way it does, and why is that occurring, and what does that say about where they find themselves vis-a-vis society writ large, and what if anything can people like Martha and Jim and others do about that in order to maybe accept things as they are, as difficult as it might be, or perhaps try to initiate some kind of change for the better, if that is even possible. So that type of dialogue and discussion occurs while we are seeing the multi-leveled or multi-textured drama, docudrama, documentary unfold before our very eyes. So it is a very rich palette of cinematic expression, very experimental, but that experimentation also is infused with a very passionate and very individually realized trajectory of story that is undeniable and very, very moving indeed. And also too, some of the choices of art and music come to mind, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the supplements going forward. But this is a very rich film. This is a very rewarding film. It is a complex film in terms of its structure, but it's also, I think, complex in terms of how deeply personal it goes. And that deep personal, say, exploration might to some be quite uncomfortable indeed. It is also very potentially quite mind expanding in many respects. I mean, it does engender many points of discussion for a very serious and incredibly serious topic. And also, this is a continuing topic that also is finding voice and expression in some of the supplements, which we'll talk about momentarily as well. And it's also, again, a very deep and personal expression in a very artistically rigorous and profoundly a brilliant cinematic way of expression from the mind and heart and soul of the filmmaker artist Martha Coolidge. So you're getting a real complete package here, and one that after you've seen it, it will resonate. Really will. It will resonate for. It has that ripple effect. Kind of cascading ripple effect that is incredibly powerful, and it's a testament to the power of this film. And it seems and I don't mean this in a negative connotation, it seems quote unquote simple in its design, perhaps, a drama, and we see the drama being filmed. And I think that itself too, I think, is very important because it has an ease of, say, accessibility. We can enter into this world of the making of the film as well as the film itself, and we can understand immediately what is going on. It makes its subject matter, I think, or it makes the world of the film easy to access, thus allowing us into this intimate setting and allowing us to be, perhaps in that way too, part of the conversation, while at the same time being witness to this brilliant style and this brilliant cinematic expression from a filmmaker artist extraordinaire who is the one, the only Martha Coolidge. And so just to conclude, it is a cinematic achievement par excellence from the great filmmaker artist Martha Coolidge. And so if you are interested, my dear friends, this is your opportunity to watch this captivating, incredible film. This is the work from 1975, which is Not a Pretty Picture. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Not a Pretty Picture, courtesy of this Blu-ray edition, which is what I have in front of me. And it is 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio, and it's purported to be a new 4K digital restoration supervised and approved by director Martha Coolidge with uncompressed monaural soundtrack. At least that's according to what's written on the back of the box here. And if we were to, and I have the disc in the player right now, and if we were to look at the description of the presentation as found in the fold-out leaflet, it says about the master, and I quote here, excuse me, it says, Not a Pretty Picture is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.33 to 1, supervised and approved by director Martha Coolidge. This new 4K restoration, excuse me, was created from the 16mm negative, A/B rolls, and a 16mm internegative. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter magnetic tracks. This restoration was undertaken by the Academy Film Archive, and the Film Foundation restoration funding was provided by the Hobson Lucas Family Foundation. And it is a, it is a, I mean, it, it's so revelatory in how, I mean, this film is so revelatory, and I think when I see the film here, courtesy of the Criterion Blu-ray, I mean, it feels like, I mean, I think it's meant to be reminding us of this is a 16 millimeter film. I mean, I think there's something about the 16 millimeter film itself that has it has an immediacy to it, and it has something of a direct, almost hands-on approach in terms of the tactile nature of the filmmaking process itself. I don't know if that makes any sense. I mean, not that other film stock doesn't, but there's something about 16 millimeter films that has that kind of almost a subtle and subliminal association with, at least from the film watcher perspective, from my position. And so when I'm reminded of that, it does have, again, that hands-on tactile quality of it, in terms of it, an independent, rugged filmmaking spirit and drive. And certainly Martha Coolidge and company here, as they're making it, we actually see that in action in terms of some of the key sequences of this film, as I said, when we understand what the structure of the film is, from in terms of the drama itself and the making of the drama, and it's combined in this very compelling way. So and that 16 millimeter feel and directness, I think, is preserved very eloquently and very nicely when I watch this film on the Blu-ray here, on my monitor, either on the monitor here, or my in a slightly larger television in a separate room with the sound capabilities. So I really I love that. I love how it's not too overly processed in its restorative cleanup, as it were. It has the same intimate 16 millimeter quality that's not lost. And so I find that to be not just refreshing, but also, I think, very much in keeping with and very consistent with, again, my viewpoint and how I respond to this film. Based on the immediacy and the hands-on nature of the independent filmmaking drive of Martha Coolidge, that in turn is paralleling how intimate and personal this storytelling is. So the distance is quite small indeed between my position as a viewer of the film and the content of the film itself. And I think the 16 millimeter quality, as preserved by how it looks, by the way it looks on the Criterion disc, is not just fascinating but superb. And also too the because I think we're supposed to be reminded too, in a sense, and this is, I think, preserved the way it sounds as well. There is also a sense of theatricality that's occurring, and I don't mean that as a knock against, say, the drama aspect of the film. We feel like it is something that's being acted out, that's being played through character performance by the actors, and also being observed and guided and molded by the director, and also the people, the cast and crew. So, and when those scenes cut to, say, the scenes of the the making of the film, and then they travel back to, say, the actual drama of the film itself, you can tell that there is a style change, in a manner of speaking. But there's also I think, a really earnest way in which the film is being put together, which I think is an incredible, powerful part of the film. And that, as I say, is not just it's preserved not just through the way it looks in terms of 16 millimeter, but also how it sounds as well. And you get all the tinny quality of the echo of the place, as Martha Coolidge and company are talking and working through together the intensity of some of the scenes, and working with the decor and ambiance of the environment, and that room, or those rooms themselves, also tell a lot of story. And so I like that sort of almost delicate delicate echo that you have preserved here in some of the things that you hear in the soundtrack, plus also the music itself. And we'll get to some of the musical choices when we talk about the supplements here. But all in all, I think the film feels so well served on display here when it comes to this release. So this is the Criterion presentation for Not a Pretty Picture. And so now let us turn our attention to the supplements that can be found together with this Criterion release of Not a Pretty Picture, the Martha Coolidge, a brilliant work, Not a Pretty Picture. And so I have the disc in the machine behind me. And so as you can see, I have the movie and chapters and supplements and subtitles menu. And we have also the sort of the images, the black and white photo, and we have the actor and writer, director, producer in one still that is part of the main frame here, and in a room that is very important and very critical to the story of the film, and also to the actual story here. And also we have images that are, again, a type of moving montage that are, again, part of this environment that you're seeing. So it's a very well assembled Blu-ray menu that's also mimicking what we also see in terms of the great cover art, which we'll talk about again a little bit later in this video. But the supplements. We have two supplements. Now, it's too bad we have only two in terms of quantity. It would have been nice, of course, that we had more in terms of maybe more supplements. The more, the merrier, of course. Maybe a commentary track would have been nice. I don't think we get a commentary track, or maybe some more information, say, about Martha Coolidge and Martha Coolidge's work. Maybe as a result of or leading up to Not a Pretty Picture, and then maybe beyond Not a Pretty Picture. Again, it would have been really great to have, for example, some aspects of that. But that is not at all to take away from the great things that we are getting here in terms of these two supplements. And also we have some things that we can talk about in terms of the great essay that's included in the leaflet. We'll talk about the essay a little bit later, but first let us turn our attention to great supplement number one, which is Martha Coolidge and Allison Anders. So Allison Anders is another filmmaker, and Martha Coolidge is a filmmaker, and they're speaking together, and it is a wonderful conversation, approximately 26-minute conversation. It's described by the Criterion Collection in the Blu-ray menu as, and I quote, "In this conversation, produced by the Criterion Collection in Los Angeles in 2024, writer-director Martha Coolidge talks to friend and fellow filmmaker Allison Anders about the making of Not a Pretty Picture and the importance of telling rape victims' stories on screen." Again, this is approximately 26 minutes, and they're sitting together in a room, sitting face to face, and they're described as being friends, and you can tell immediately that they have this wonderful rapport with each other, and they're laughing immediately before the opening credits of this supplement itself. And so a wonderful example, again, their closeness, and also how they're able to talk in very direct terms about the subject matter and how it affects them personally. And Alison Anders does say too about her own story and her own life, and how and her own experience, which is hers and her, and which is her experience on the one hand, but also she's willing and able to reveal some of it to Martha and also to us as we are listening to this again. Great conversation between the two, and also talking about how this film was made in 1975 and the subject matter, again, telling the story of Martha's rape, and how there weren't that many examples in, say, cinema, at least as they acknowledge it, that are telling this type of story. One of the examples that does come up is Ida Lupino, and the filmmaker Ida Lupino, and the film that she directed, which is called Outrage, which is also dealing in that film's way with a very similar type of subject matter. But so that's mentioned as well. But I think the relatively speaking, maybe few in number of cinematic examples of this type of story being told, which is what makes, which starts the story in terms of the importance of this film, Not a Pretty Picture, but also the way in which it is establishing a lot in terms of the mode of storytelling, filmmaking process, or storytelling in terms of telling this story about her through the actors that are involved, who also some of whom do express and do voice their own personal stories in telling this story, and also how this, in many ways, is establishing the cinematic ability to have these stories being told, and also the importance of the stories being told. And as I say, in the endeavor not just to reclaim, but also to proclaim oneself. And I think that's what's being referred to, at least when the Criterion Collection is describing as being the importance of telling victim stories on screen. And indeed, Alison Anders and Martha Coolidge do talk about this in the tail end of this conversation, about how when this film was released, and about how this became a means by which people who were watching this film were able to then, for those who were impacted in this way, were able to use it as a means to tell their stories, and not just as a means of maybe a catharsis or emotional catharsis, but also as a means of a type of establishment of an important type of establishment. So it becomes a real deeply moving film that affects on so many levels, and so it's touched upon so well in this conversation, and also to talking about how. And again, Alison Anders, I think, describes it very aptly as being very ahead of its time in that way. And also talking a little bit about Martha Coolidge's background, her growing up with cinema, watching movies that she mentions, but also talking about her films that she made, some of the films that were made prior to this. And there's a film that she made which is called Old Fashioned Woman, which is also the second supplement here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But those are family portrait films in a way, but also I should say, talking about very personal, deep, and profound and intimate questions that do come up about identity, about roles of gender in society writ large, and also in sort of inner circles, and how that, if anything, either is reflective of, or maybe inconsistent with, or maybe a little bit of the two, type of viewpoint of oneself and one's own, say, one's own feelings of oneself in terms of career, profession, maybe position in society, vis-a-vis other people in similar station, or family, etc., schooling, etc. So these themes do come up, and they are, I think, a part of the fabric of the film Not a Pretty Picture, very much so, when you think about Martha as a student, a teenage student, and not just her interactions with her clique of friends, but also her interaction with the other people at school, and also interaction with the teachers, and also her roommate, etc., and also with herself, and how that affects herself, and what it is that she is either unable to do about it, or what it is that she resolves to do about it. So this becomes, I think, maybe very revelatory, and some indication of Martha Coolidge in terms of her approach, narrative-wise, and maybe even thematic-wise, her own concerns as an artist, and also talking again in very, very direct and quite immediate terms, and also very in a very brave, and also a very honest way, talking about her own experience, and there's a way in which certain personal details of Martha's story do emerge, and also of the actor who plays Martha, Michelle Minetti, and they do speak. As I mentioned, there's some scenes of behind-the-scenes footage, or making of the film, documentary, and interview footage, and so there are actual personal details that emerge. And I think the film tries to protect identities and block out certain details of names, etc. And you hear maybe beeps, etc. on the soundtrack in order to cover up actual names to be used, and that sort of thing. But the point is that it is very, very personal. It's very personally charged, and Martha Coolidge has acknowledged that here in this contemporary discussion. And also, there's questions about how roles were cast. The role of young Martha, the role of Curly, the role of Anne. There's an interesting anecdote about how Anne, the real life Anne, the roommate, became part of the production. It was almost by chance, as Martha Coolidge mentions. It's a very fascinating anecdote. And also entering into a conversation too about. As I mentioned, Jim Carrington, about how, as Martha Coolidge mentions, how the role and approaching the really affected him. It really affected him. And there's some scenes, there's some moments where the actor is seen in the film expressing his frustration. It's very direct frustration, and so he's expressing how he feels very annoyed. And the fact that he's able to voice it is quite fascinating, and because it involves not just an emotional intensity but also physicality that is being on offer here. And also, too, I should mention, and which is acknowledged here between Alison Anders and Martha Coolidge, is that the actual act itself is not shown on screen. And this is an artistic choice that was made by Martha Coolidge, as she discusses here, and it's something about I don't want to maybe to paraphrase how they describe it, or how Alison Anders and Martha Coolidge describes it here in this discussion. It was the choice that was about not wanting to in any way offer up the film, even hint at, or even the remotest possibility of some kind of exploitative edge. And that's not the point of the film, and that's certainly not the point of the film. And so that artistic choice, and I think it's very powerfully revealed and told here, and it's one that I think is very consistent in keeping with what one can perceive as being one of the many focal points of the film. I think is not just a very powerful choice, and I think a very respectable one on the part of Martha Coolidge, but we can understand a little bit as to why she makes this choice here, as to not show the actual act itself, but sort of the lead up to, and perhaps the going to the very edge, and also showing the aftermath as well, but not going into that type of even the remotest possibility of a hint of some kind of exploitative edge to the subject matter, because again, it's a very intense and very sensitive subject matter, which they both here acknowledge. Of course they do. So in a very appropriate way, as they talk about it. So, and there are some really, even in this, and it's in the film itself, and also in the discussion of the film. I mean, they don't shy away from the complexities and how this is. It is talking about a specific person or specific people, and from the point of view or the storytelling point of view of Martha Coolidge, the person and also the artist. But Martha Coolidge and Alison Anders here do claim and admit and acknowledge that people's stories are very individual and personal, and they might not necessarily be falling within, say, the same or similar types of, say, gender dynamics that we see played out in the docudrama of Not a Pretty Picture. And so I think Martha Coolidge herself acknowledges this, that in terms of different gender dynamics that can be that can be involved with any type of personal story. An individual story is that individual story, and that individual's experience is an individual's experience. And so, and I think she acknowledges this. But again, that also shows too about, as I mentioned before, the accessibility of this film, and what the film is not only trying to portray, but also what it means to an audience member that is connecting with it. And so it becomes something where there is a powerful force of connectivity between the viewer and the viewership of this film, and also with the film itself. And I think that has to do with the intimate nature of how it's being shot. Again, I mentioned the wonderful 60 millimeter process, and also the way in which Martha Coolidge puts herself on the line so much that we cannot help but not just respect what it is she's doing, but also marvel at the cinematic prowess in which she is telling her story. And it not just commands our respect, but also we go with it, and then we are affected by it. And I think, as Martha Coolidge and Alison Anders do acknowledge, some people who watch the film can become very, very deeply connected and very affected by it, because it might remind people about their own personal stories, which again, depending on the person, depending on the situation, might be very difficult, and might be very traumatic, and might be incredibly psychologically stressful and distressing and terrible. But also this idea of reclamation and proclamation of one's own self through the act of telling the story is acknowledged between Alison Anders and Martha Coolidge as being maybe one possible step, maybe therapeutic step, or maybe, as I say, that step of proclamation. So it becomes it becomes a film that I think reaches many facets, and quite a multi-dimensional work indeed. Really brilliant. Also, too, there's some great revelatory moments. Like, there's a film by Claudia Weil, which is called Girlfriends, which is also part of the Criterion Collection physical media catalog, by the way, and a great release that occurred a year or so ago. It's really great. You should check it out. But I didn't realize this, and Alison Anders didn't realize it, but Martha Coolidge mentions that there is a song that was made specifically for Not a Pretty Picture, because of the low budget, and how the production couldn't afford to buy the rights to already pre-existing songs, so they had to essentially have songs created for the film, but also to recreate a type of period momentum of the film, because the drama of the film takes place several years prior to the 1970s, and so they had to recreate the sense of sort of the 1960s ambiance and rock and roll, so to speak. But that song choice is also something that we'll see later in Claudia Weil's film, and so that song choice was something that the director of that film requested Martha Coolidge, and so it's an interesting cinema trivia bit, really wonderful, fantastic indeed. So 26 minutes. This is a great conversation between two artists, brilliant artists, and two deeply close personal friends. This is Martha Coolidge and Alison Anders on Not a Pretty Picture. This is approximately 26 minutes. But that's not all, because the second of the two supplements here is Old Fashioned Woman, and this is the name of the let's say family portrait film that Martha Coolidge made, and the Criterion Collection describes it here in the Blu-ray menu as, and I quote, "Martha Coolidge made this documentary portrait of her grandmother, Mabel Hilton Coolidge, quote, a happy, active, funny, and often wise Yankee lady," unquote, in 1974. Here, Mabel reminisces, opines on birth control and abortion, and considers her approaching death with gentle dignity. She illustrates her story with stunning photographs taken across her 86-year life. In the end, we see she is, quote, not such an old-fashioned woman, end quote. So this is, again, described as being from 1974. This documentary feature, it's approximately 50 minutes, 49 minutes. There aren't any subtitles, at least as far as I can tell on my disc here. There aren't any subtitle options here for this old-fashioned woman documentary per se, but it is divided into chapters, I think 6 or 7 chapters. So it is and let me get to the film itself. This is a very moving portrait, insightful, very surprising, wonderfully surprising, profound, witty, funny, again, with Martha Coolidge's grandmother, Mabel Hilton Coolidge, at front and center. We hear her voice, we see her speak. We also see moments where she is talking with Martha Coolidge herself. Sometimes Martha Coolidge appears just maybe slightly off camera or within the frame itself as they are engaging with each other, interacting with each other. But also, we also see moments where we're photographs, where we go through the Martha's life, or Mabel's life, excuse me, as Martha is asking about Mabel, the grandmother, from her childhood and her upbringing, and also her viewpoints on many things that not just affect her or affected her and affect her as a woman, Mabel, but also her Mabel, the grandmother's viewpoints on um, say certain political aspects, and this has a certain itself very multifaceted nature to it as well, because we understand, based on things that are revealed in maybe the latter half of this documentary, we understand that there are very close political connections with her family, the Coolidge family, and Mabel herself, and U.S. politics, and then also very interpersonal, and how they affect her in terms of gender roles and society. And how that affected her own upbringing and her Mabel's own sense of self as she grew up from childhood into adolescence into young adulthood and then beyond, and how she shares some details about her musical interests, her artistic interests, her family life as a child growing up, how she was, how she describes it, maybe closer to her mother than to her father, and that was due to things that she reveals about uh, her father, and then her discussion about the role, the expected gender roles, the quote unquote expected roles of married men, of family men, of fathers in households, much like the Coolidge household at the time. And then also her own education, and where she went to school, and her major and her minor, and also her socializing interactions, how she met her husband, and this also leads to Martha Coolidge asking Mabel about Mabel's viewpoints on sex and sexuality, sex education, and also it's mentioned here reminiscence about family life, but also opining and discussing with Martha about birth control and about abortion. There's some very direct questions here, and the discussion points, and also the comments and responses from Mabel, the grandmother, are very revealing, and indeed they showcase a warm, intelligent, and deeply thinking woman, and a wonderful individual human being who is so open with her life, and so non-hesitant in sharing these things with us, and also with her granddaughter, Martha. And there are some details too that emerge that become very personal, and they have to do with certain personal details of her son, or Martha's father, and what happened to him, and how he lost his life rather early in his life. And so this reveals a very tragic and very deeply despondent moment, or a period of Mabel's own life, and she expresses it, but she's expressing it in a very direct way, and she's also touching upon her own life, as she mentions that she's in her 80s, and she does acknowledge that maybe she has more years behind her than in front of her, as she self acknowledges. That doesn't stop her from showcasing, I think, a wonderful sense of level-headed optimism, if I could describe it that way, in the manner of her voice and the way she is revealing aspects of her life going forward, and also very telling and honest things about how she finds herself now and also in the coming years. So, and it's also set against its multi-level too, much like not a pretty pictures. It's multi-level too, in that we have uh, details of her biography with her maybe voiceover and pictures and photographs that are edited together in a wonderful montage style. We also see moments of Mabel talking to someone off camera. We understand it's her granddaughter Martha Coolidge, and sometimes we see Martha Coolidge in the frame as well. And then also we see the family gathering. It's like a Thanksgiving gathering, and there's also a commentary too about the family gathering and how the gatherings have become somewhat smaller in recent years for circumstances that Mabel and Martha do mention a bit here. So it is a very profound portrait. It has a macro level, I think, a profound nature to it, and also a very intimate level, profound nature to it. That is a very telling, very revealing, very honest, very personal, incredibly touching. And it was mentioned too in the earlier Alison Anders and Martha Coolidge discussion, the first supplement on the Criterion Collection release. Remember, because they do mention this is described as being from 1974. So this is in many ways a film that preceded, in many ways, it is a film that precedes Not a Pretty Picture. That's my understanding anyway. There are, I think, many parallels that one can draw between Old-Fashioned Woman and Not a Pretty Picture. For reasons that I've just endeavored to cite here. There are also distinct characters to the works themselves, and also it's another example too of just how what type of fearless Martha Coolidge is, but also Mabel Coolidge as well, but fearless in a way that's not necessarily calling attention to itself. It's fearless in its intense and also immediate and also down to earth honesty. This is not neither Martha nor Mabel are people who are or overtly calling attention to themselves in a way that that is trying to be things other than who they are, which is I think very down to earth human beings, and it comes through quite remarkably well in works like Not a Pretty Picture and Old Fashioned Woman. So this film is approximately, as I said, 50 minutes, 50 minutes. So it's wonderful that we have this work. It can be said to be then a kind of maybe double feature in a manner of speaking. You have Old Fashioned Woman as being a supplement. It looks and sounds great, by the way. And then we have the main the quote-unquote main attraction of this Blu-ray release being Not a Pretty Picture, the main feature of this release. But you are getting two Martha Coolidge films for the price of one, in a manner of speaking. So it's wonderful to have this inclusion here. So please check this out if you can. And so let me just return to what I was saying at the outset of the supplements discussion. I would have loved to have seen more. It would have been great to have seen more. So it's a shame that we don't get more supplements to maybe have further discussions about Martha Coolidge's career or things of that nature. But what we do get is it's awesome. It is down to earth, and it's intimate and direct, and very, very, I think, I used the phrase mind expanding earlier in the discussion. These supplements are very mind expanding indeed, and a true indication of Martha Coolidge, the artist extraordinaire, and the great care and great kindness that she carries with herself, with the conversation that she has with Alison Anders, and it's mutual, and also the way she carries herself as the artist, portraying in this rich family portraiture way. Old-fashioned woman, Mabel Coolidge. So what we do get is extraordinary. So please check it out if you can. And so now let me just close out or conclude my discussion here with a few more remarks. This time let's focus on the production or the physical media aspect and the packaging, including the leaflet. Let's start with the leaflet here. This is the fold-out leaflet type. I'm not a fan of the fold-out leaflet type, to be perfectly honest. I wish this could have been a staple booklet. But oh well, that's okay, because we have the fold-out leaflet mirroring the photo montage aspect of the overall look of the Blu-ray, say cover art design and the Blu-ray menu. I should point out that the art director is Eric Skillman, and designer Polly Dedman, our production coordinator William Breeze, and print production artist Craig Phillips, art assistant Julie Sussman. So I do like this. I like the sort of black and white photography and then the color photography type of montage effect. I think it's meant to showcase drama and documentary, although there's an interesting detail about some of the color. It's not necessarily like black and white as the documentary and color as the drama, because there's some overlap between the two. So that's, I think, a fascinating interplay. But what I do like too is also the essay. This is the Molly Haskell essay, which is An Act of Reckoning. And so I mentioned earlier that it would have been nice if the Criterion Collection supplements had included, for instance, a maybe supplement about, say, the career of Martha Coolidge. Well, I think the essay by Molly Haskell, I mean, it's a it's a brilliant essay. My strong recommendation is watch the film first, and then you can read this brilliant Molly Haskell essay, because Haskell goes into so the trajectory of the filmography of Martha Coolidge leading up to Not a Pretty Picture, and then also after Not a Pretty Picture, which is great. So in many ways, the essay attempts to provide a certain sense of, say, coverage on the career and filmography of Martha Coolidge, and not just about Not a Pretty Picture, but also other aspects of her career. So that's great too. And also, too, Molly Haskell has this wonderful ability to really dissect some of the key aspects of Not a Pretty Picture. And this is a very complex film, as I was trying to suggest in my discussion earlier. But Molly Haskell does this brilliant job, much better than I could ever hope to even endeavor or even be able to do. Molly Haskell does it with such skill and such a writing prowess that this is something that I recommend wholeheartedly. I learned so much. I've read it a number of times already right now. And I'm going to keep on reading it to try to catch more details. But this is An Act of Reckoning by Molly Haskell, which is the essay that's part of the Criterion release. And so I have I'm going to open the package here. And so we have the opening here. So we have a picture adorning the disc itself and some background the inner sleeve workings, and it looks to be like it's part of a wall or an apartment or an empty loft, which is a very important detail of the environment, one of the environments. And I put the insert back in, and here we have the disc itself. So here we have the front and then the back of this. I do like also this choice of the font too, which is reminding us of the title sequences of the film, Not a Pretty Picture. So, Not a Pretty Picture. Martha Coolidge is Not a Pretty Picture. This is a great film. This is such a great film. It is courageous, it is bold, it is cinematically inventive, it is experimental, it is complex, it is deep, it is challenging, it is, in terms of its ability to tell its stories and to reveal and to insist upon or adhere to a deeply and powerfully personal approach. This is, on all levels, a remarkable achievement from a remarkable and brilliant filmmaker, artist extraordinaire, Martha Coolidge. And I'm so thrilled that this is now being made available in this Criterion Collection release, courtesy of this 2024 Blu-ray. So I hope as many people get a chance to see this as possible. It is a very difficult film, unflinching, and it is seeking to ask us certain questions as well. And so it is something that can become potentially quite an intense viewing experience. I think that is just that is also a reflection of just how powerful this film is in the grand context of not just 1970 cinema, but also cinema as a whole. So, this is a wonderful addition to the Criterion Collection physical media catalog, and it's this film from the great Martha Coolidge, which is Not a Pretty Picture. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. So until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Not a Pretty Picture, including other films by Martha Coolidge, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. And so until we meet again, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.